Hey, Yannick Nézet-Séguin, welcome back to the Berlin Philharmonic.
Thank you.
It's great to have you this program with works from the early 20th century. Still very romantic works in a way. The Mahler Symphony, I think 1902, 1904, more or less, and then a Reinecke flute concerto starting this concert 1908.
Yes.
Quite anachronic, a bit like Bruch pieces.
Absolutely.
A bit.
Absolutely. I think they fulfill their connection to romanticism is a different one, because Mahler, it was a conscious tribute to classicism, Mozart, Haydn, in a certain way of seeing it, which was very posé. It's not necessarily the way we treat these pieces nowadays, but at the time it had to be like a Rückblick. It had to be like a souvenir of a wonderful past, and it helped fulfill the message of this symphony about music on earth and music in heaven. I think the purity of this symphony is unique in Mahler's production. The Reinecke is more that it was the language of that man, Karl Reinecke, and he was aware. He's a fantastic and fascinating man, because he knew, of course, Mendelssohn and then Schumann, and followed in Leipzig the footsteps, but then knew and taught a lot of modernistic composers like Janáček, like Grieg, and he knew Strauss, he knew Mahler, but then he said, my way of writing music is still a tribute to my hero, Mendelssohn and Schumann, so I'm going to write the way I know how to write. And yes, it is anachronic, but does it really matter today, right? When we hear this piece, that it's composed much later than the era that it's evoking, it's not so relevant. The same way for me as Rachmaninoff. Of course, in many ways he was anachronic, but his music is fantastic and gorgeous. We don't need... There's music history and there's musicology, and then there's the beauty of the music that we can receive.
Actually, when working with living composers, you always get this feedback from them that their music is always written inscribing itself in a whole history of music, in a whole path, and great living composers can explain this much better than I could, but working with people like Ligeti or Kortak, for instance, shows you what the way is from Bartók, and then from before the roots, the way also Mozart's music was connected to some folk music sometimes, in his violin concertos, for instance, also in some of his operas. And all these kind of things also in Mahler you can find with these songs.
Definitely.
The adequation between the song and the instrumental music is something that is characteristic of Mahler's music, of course.
Yeah, and then the songs themselves are rooted in folk song, or in this case, with the Knabenwunderhorn, I think it goes to more the myth, or what is the transmission of a certain tradition orally, even lullabies, and it's wonderful to realize when one is playing and conducting the Fourth Symphony that this is also for Mahler a way to end a certain era about his connection to song and symphony, and his way of incorporating and integrating the vocal music. Then the symphonies 5, 6, and 7 are purely instrumental, and they achieved a very different goal before number 8 went back to it. So it still puzzles me how it would have sounded if the finale of the Fourth Symphony would have been put at the end of the Third Symphony, which it was supposed to be initially. I think it's a much better achievement, probably, to have decided to do a smaller symphony, a lighter one in a way, still so deep in its significance, but something that is connected to the essence of being a human being, from child to death and going back to childhood. I connect it even with the Kinderszenen of Schumann. There's this purity and so-called simplicity, which, as we know as interpreters, it's actually even more difficult than to achieve and to convey.
Mahler's Fourth Symphony is actually closing more or less a cycle of the Wunderhorn period, I would say, with the Lieder and the symphony. And there was also Das Klagende Lied, which was a very special work right in the beginning, which texture you find again later as a genuine Mahler compositions, because he was a lot influenced by the material he got also from Hans Roth, also for his first symphonies. And a lot of this you can hear nearly one-to-one when you compare these symphonies. But then after it was more of the Kindertotenlieder cycle, matching the Fifth, Sixth, Seventh Symphony, and with the apotheose of the Eighth Symphony, and then the premonition of death, of course, with the Ninth Symphony. You can hear in the Fourth Symphony already the famous trumpet beginning of Mahler 5, actually. How does that fit in there, actually, in this rather simple symphony?
Yeah, it's extraordinary when that happens, because it's at a moment where the description from Mahler of this moment, which is the climactic, it's on the way back after the climax of the first movement, is when a beautiful sky, to quote Mahler, beautiful blue sky, is so beautiful that it starts to give you a certain panic. And it's not because it's in itself threatening, but it's the way us as human beings, we react to so much beauty. This is very hard to put into words, and this is why music exists. But then on the calming down from that nightmarish vision, there is this premonition, which to me tells me that even... well, maybe it's a bit simplistic, but even when something is as beautiful and as pure, there is always this threat, especially in Mahler, of what can go wrong, and always this superstition that he had, which also Alma was sharing. And this is, of course, it's not easy to live with those feelings, and thank goodness we don't, most of us mortals. But the genius as Mahler was able to be the catharsis of this this feeling. You know, I'm a very positive person in general. You are. I'm a happy person, and I'm blessed with a nice family history. But you know, even within this, there is a side of each one of us that doubts, that fears, and I think this premonition of the fifth is really what it indicates in the course of the purity of the fourth.
Actually shows so much involvement physically, but also style and superiority in terms of looking at the movement as a whole, or as a symphony as a whole, or a concerto as a whole. At the same time, how do you manage with your restless life, with one foot in Philadelphia, one in Montreal, one in Rotterdam, with your principal guest position in London, and all your guesting, like here in Berlin, or also in other major music centers of this world? How do you cope with all of this, and how do you keep this balance?
You know, it's a very good question. Music is a joy. Music is a gift. Making music with wonderful musicians, as it is here in Berlin, is a privilege. And it's a privilege to share it with people. And I always want to live that privilege the most I can. It's also important increasingly for me to keep a certain balance, because you're right, that hectic life, so far it's good. I can still concentrate and give my best, but I also have the duty everywhere I go to be in touch with myself, and being in touch to serve the composer well and to serve the orchestra well. That's very much the way I see a conductor should be. And I think it's a challenge that we all have in a certain point in life. Now I will turn 40 next year, and I'm very much thinking about this, how to make it a very beautiful life, very rich and full, which each experiences and each geography helping what I can give elsewhere, because I take so much from everywhere and can give it back, but also not burning it. And the fact of having my foot in different families now with groups I know makes me grow as an artist more on the depth, instead of being like 5 years ago doing 1 week and many debuts. That was very exciting, but I think it's much better to develop. And even, it's my third visit here now in 4 years, and I feel, I feel a certain level of trust now that we have together. And so even as a guest, I think that is the most beautiful thing to treasure and to go deeper in the music when we know each other.
Thanks for these beautiful words, Yannick Nézet-Séguin. Enjoy this time together with us and looking forward to next time.
I'm looking forward to. Thank you.